Hi, I'm Stuart Lodge, almost forgot my own name, and also known as Lodge. And I'd just like to talk today for probably about half an hour about how I use XIBs, also known as NIBs, in my MonoTouch, MonoDevelop, xCode projects in order to display UITableViewCells. Now I will be mixing in some MvvmCross because that's the way I develop code, but I think the way that I use nibs and XIBs might also be useful to people who don't use MvvmCross. So bear with me. I hope that it shows you the flow that I go through when I create cells. So moving forwards as fast as we can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through a pet shop management app today. And it's a very simple management app. It's just for demo. And the first step in actually doing that is just to set up a simple project. Here I'm using a single project. Normally I'd split this so that these files in core would be in a PCL, and that PCL project could be shared across MonoDroid and across Windows Phone and across WinRT and hopefully soon across Xamarin.Mac, already across WPF, and I think some people have done it across Silverlight projects as well. And that's where that would normally go. And the UI would then just sit within each of these projects. So if I quickly introduce you to what we have in here at the moment, because I've set up the basic project. In core we have a couple of interfaces for our pet shop. The first one is the supplier for the pet shop, and that just gives you a price for your basic animals, which are kittens and dogs, and it also gives you a way of buying them. Interfaces are there so they can be mocked in testing, they can be used for testing, and so that you can replace things afterwards. It's loose coupling of your objects. And we then also have a pricing model, and the pricing model is the way that a pet shop works out. If I've bought a kitten at £50, how much will I sell it for? Or dollars for some of you listening, or euros indeed. And then we have some models, and those models are all about animals. So if you take a look at an animal, every animal has a name and an image URL. That's fairly straightforward. Dogs add the fact that, are they good with children or not? Kittens add, are they litter trained or not? We then also have some generators. These just use random numbers, you can see, in order to generate us some dogs or some kittens. And we use services like PlaceDog and PlaceKitten in order to get hold of those URLs. I love those services. So that's what we have in terms of models. Obviously it's just for demo, but that's what there's there. We then have a couple of services which implement those interfaces. So we do have the animal supplier, and this just returns fixed prices for its animals. And we do have a pricing model, and that just doubles our input price in order to get the output. Then within view models at the moment, and these are the things which will link the model, the data and the services at the back end there with the UI. We've got a pet shop animal. And a pet shop animal is really just an animal that has a price and has a couple of commands attached to it which allow you to increase the price, decrease the price, or to sell the animal. All very straightforward, I hope. And we have also a pet shop view model. And the pet shop view model, particularly importantly here, has an observable collection. And that is an observable collection of pet shop animals. Observable collections, for those of you who don't know, they are lists which also have send out events using our notify collection changed when things get added and removed. So it's just a way that the UI can be updated dynamically without reloading the whole list. And what else do we have in here? We have some commands to add kittens and dogs. We have some properties of the shop's finances, which we won't really talk about during this, which are for sales, for revenue, for bank balance. And then the implementation of these guys actually uses that animal supplier and uses the pricing model. So that just leaves the final thing to talk about within the core, and that is the app itself. And the app itself is very small, as you can see, and all it does is register singletons for those pricing models and for those animal suppliers. So it's all very straightforward. Beyond that, at the moment, the UI has pretty much nothing in it. It's just got the fact that the UI is tied to that app we've just seen. Nothing else in here of any interest really. The app delegate is just a standard one that on startup gets hold of a setup object, and then after setup is completed, it tries to navigate to the pet shop. This obviously won't run at the moment because we don't have any views, so we've got view models but no UI, but we'll add that. And everything else in here is just standard with some snippets at the bottom that I may refer to during this talk when I type things wrong. So that's where we are. We have set up this basic MonoTouch app. We have then added some model and service classes, so you've seen the kittens and dogs, you've seen the animal supplies and the pricing models. We've then added two view models, which was a pet shop view model, and the pet shop view model had stock, and in that stock were some pet shop animals. Which means now, finally, already, we can actually start talking about the UI. So back over in MonoDevelop, what I'll normally do is I will create a folder called Views. Except that somehow I already have a folder called Views. Let me just see what's on disk. This is the penalty of using some pre-canned things. Let me just delete what's there, because we don't want what might already be there from previous demos. So we've got this folder, and it is called Views. I'm just proving that I'm recording this in one take. And in that Views, let's add another folder called Cells. So this is where we're going to put our kitten cell and our dog cell. And in there we will add a kitten cell. So let's just do it. And that's just a C# class at this stage. Yeah, there's nothing in the MonoTouch thing. It's just a normal class that we're going to create. So hopefully it's off creating it. You may notice when you use this dialog that it hangs around for a few seconds. If it does that, don't hit new several times, because it will actually create multiple things. I don't know if I've hit it once. Yeah, okay, so I missed it. But if it does freeze, then that's why I don't hit it several times. Right, so we've got our kitten cell, and the first thing I'm going to do is make it partial, because we're hopeful that MonoDevelop and MonoTouch will create a companion file for this soon. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to register it as a kitten cell with the UI kit. And what that really means is that we're just really marking it up. Oops, not the UI kit there. We're marking it up as a kitten cell, so that Xcode can pick it up, and so that at runtime it will be tied to the zib. The next thing we want to do is inherit. Now normally you would be inheriting from a UITableViewCell, which is in the MonoTouch UI kit, and that gives you the base cell functionality. However, because I'm using MvvmCross, I'm going to inherit from something that inherits from that as well, and that is from a base bindable table view cell, and hopefully that will resolve. Hopefully I've typed it right. And all that really gives you is the extra binding functionality, so it's useful for that, and that's why I use it. But if you're just doing cells, then you might not want to use it that way. And then I would like to have an identifier for this. So this is going to be one of those NS strings. So we're going to make it a static read-only NS string, which is going to be the cell identifier. Actually, let's just call it identifier for short. And that's going to be a new, we haven't got NS string in our namespace at the moment. Yes, we have. So that's going to be a new NS string. And that we'll just make sure all of our names match really by calling that a kitten cell as well. Yeah. And then the final thing we really need to do in here is just to add our special constructors. So, MonoTouch, you'll quite often see things with kitten cell. Well, you won't see kitten cell very often, but you'll quite often see two constructors. One which is just a default one, and one which takes an int pointer handle. So the first one is the one you'll call from code, and the second one is the one that MonoTouch will call when it needs to tie it up with a native object. So normally you would just pass those down to the base implementations, but because we've got some binding code in as well, then what we're going to do here is we're not going to pass it down like this. We're going to actually add just some bindings, and for that we are going to have our bindings for our kitten, which is text, just like any binding text in XML or whatever. We'll leave it as empty for now, but we'll come back to that after we've drawn out the UI and got a little bit further. So we just pass those through like that. So hopefully that should build. Let me just check that I haven't broken anything. Yeah, so that I think is built. And then the next thing we want to do is we actually want to add this XIB/NIB file that goes alongside it. And to do that, you go to MonoTouch and you will find, you know, all these options in here for MonoTouch. And what I choose generally is an iPhone view. It doesn't matter. You can choose iPhone or iPad. It's just going to create an XIB file here for your cell. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the names match, and then I'm going to choose new, and that just generates this XIB file. The XIB file itself is horrible. I can't tell you what's inside here. It's unreadable XML, but if you double click on it, then what should happen is Xcode will open, and in the background MonoTouch, MonoDevelop will generate some interesting files for the XIB, and we'll get the editor up. Now the editor shows a whole like page, if you like, a whole UI view controller for a whole window. We don't want that, so the first thing we do is we go over here and we hit the delete button and it goes away. Then we come down here and you can see we're on the third one of these guys in this little library section, and we type that we would like a TableViewCell, please, and you can see it comes up there. So you drag it to your design surface, and there you are. There's your TableViewCell that's going to be used, and it's listed over here in objects. And we're going to make this a bit higher, and in fact we're going to fix the properties here, and we're going to say that, you know, we're going to make it 120 high, and that's, you know, what its height's going to be. The next things we really want to do is, again, having it selected, we're going to set a couple of properties in these panes. The first one, as you can see, you know, choosing this third little sub tab within this area, you can see there's something called custom class, and the custom class we'd really like to use is something called kitten cell. So if you start typing, you'll see it's come up as kitten cell immediately, and the reason it's done that is because if you look at what MonoTouch and MonoDevelop has generated, is they've generated some kitten cell header files for you, which, you know, Xcode then uses and says, oh, there's a kitten cell type. And if you actually take a look a bit further and see what kitten cell is, it's even worked out, even though it was inheriting from an MvvmCross file, it's worked out that it is a UITableViewCell. So MonoDevelop has done a really good job in generating that for us, which means that in our XIB, if I can get back to it, we can use it. Be very careful when you type in here and you enter this kitten cell as a class, that you do tab away to a different control before changing to another sub window, because Xcode has a habit of losing these things if you haven't tabbed away. The next thing we want to do is just set the reuse identifier, so that's on the next sub little tab along, and again we're going to set that to kitten cell. At that point we have a kitten cell, but obviously we don't have any, and it's linked to our C# object, but obviously at this stage we don't have any content in there. So what I'd like to do is just design a kitten cell, and to do that I'll come back down to the library and I'll say, right, well, my kittens are going to have an image, so let's add an image, and what we're going to do is position it using these things, and I'm going to go quite fast in this positioning, I hope. So I'd like it to be 160 wide. I'd like it to start at the top of the cell but halfway across, and I'd like it to fill the cell, so I'm going to make it 120 high. Oops, my cell's only 100 wide, 100 tall. In fact, my cell's only 90 tall. So that's my second half of my kitten cell there. I'd also like to add a label, so let's add a label, and this is for the kitten name. So I'm going to add the label at the top, and if I need to, I can style this label a bit. So let's, you know, choose this tab here, and let's choose to make it system bold. Obviously that's not the most exciting of fonts, and make it a little bit bigger. Done. And let me just, you know, allow this a bit more room. So that's, you know, what the label looks like, and so the name is going to go there. That text will never be shown at runtime, so feel free to use it for your design time data. That's the first label done. Let's add another label for price, and so the price is going to go here, so price will go there. This we're going to leave quite small because we don't really need it, and that's what we put there. And then finally we'll have another label down the bottom here, and this label for kittens is whether or not it's litter trained. So let's make it a different color just to give it some excitement in its life, and let's you know, put the text in, and this text will be shown at runtime in this particular example of litter trained. Okay, so those are all of our, you know, controls that we need within our cell, all added. And now we need to actually link those across to C#. And to do that, because we've set up this kitten cell and it's you know, bound, if you like, it's linked to the C# object, all we have to do is to show an assistant editor. And then what you can do is either here or in the UI, depending on where you want to be, what you can do is you can just right click or control click on these objects and bring this menu up, or you can go over here and you get the same menu, or you can go over here and you can right click on objects. Any of those things will give you the feature that you're really looking for. So what you want to do is you want to create a new referencing outlet, and you want to create that in your assistant editor. So we drag it down there and we say, right, I'd like to call this my so this is my name label was the first, well, I don't know, it's my image. So this is my kitten image view is the first thing we drag down. You can see that's created. Then the next one is the, let's do it on this UI. The next one is the name label. You've got to be able to actually use a mouse, and I'm on a touchpad at the moment, so it's just a bit fiddly. So this is the name label. The next one, oops, connect. The next one is the price label. Oops, so I've selected one already existing, and that's the wrong thing to do, so I'm going to delete that and do it again. So that's my price label. And then finally we have this litter trained label, and I'll use this one over here for it just to show you that you can use any of them. And we're going to insert a new one, and this one is litter trained label. Connect. So that's it, we've created these things. All we have to do now is save, and that is the end of our, you know, XIB excitement for this particular cell. There are plenty of other things we could have talked about in this editor. There is, for example, the sizing here, and the fact that you can determine, you know, for this image, for example, you probably would want to fix it to the right hand side and not the left, and you probably would want it to expand vertically. For these other guys, the default settings are probably reasonable. There's quite a lot in this editor, and it's quite useful to use the advanced things. Perhaps in another tutorial I'll show you how I do use the same zibs across iPad and iPhone sometimes, you know, across different widths. But you know, hopefully that's it. So let's save that and close it, and then when we come back to MonoDevelop, what should happen, as you can see down the bottom here, it's detected that things have changed and it runs some background processes. And what should happen now is you'll see that kitten cell has a companion file, and in that companion file are the properties, these new properties, which are kitten image view, name label, price label, litter train label, which magically will get linked at runtime so that you can access them. Right, having done that, there's now some code to type. So I'm going to go quite quickly through this. So we know that we want to set the name text on this class. So what we'll do is we'll set it, and when it we'll get it, and when we get it, we want to return it from the name label. What did I call it? This dot kitten. This dot. Oh, it was a name label. So we get it from the name label text, and when we set it, we want to set it on the same thing. We then have a integer we want to set, which is price, and when we set the price, we need, or when we get the price, there's going to be a little bit more code to do. Normally, yeah, okay, let's do it properly. So there's an int which is the price. We would normally try, we normally do int32.try parse, and this would be the this.price label .text, and that would be out of price, and then we'd return the price. You could store this in a local variable instead if you want, you know, but I've just putting everything I can into the code here, and then this dot price label dot text equals value dot toString. So obviously it's a bit fiddlier with price here the way we've done it, just because it's an int. You might normally do this using a value converter and just use a string instead, but again, this is just demo. We then have this boolean we're going to have, which is isLitterTrained, and the isLitterTrained again has a bit of fiddliness, but what we really want to do is just link that to whether or not we're going to show or hide that label. So what we're going to return is whether or not that label is shown, which is actually the inverse of whether it's hidden. So it's not this dot littertrained, isLitterTrained, no, wrong one, sorry, dot littertrained label dot hidden. And when we set it, we're going to set it using the reverse logic again. So this is this dot littertrained label dot hidden equals not value. So hopefully you've seen, it's a bit fiddly. We've got some properties to write on it. They have to be public properties because otherwise we can't bind to them using reflection. But hopefully you've seen how we put those things together. Yeah, they're all quite straightforward. The final one is the public string, which is the image URL. And in order to work out how we're going to use the image URL, we're going to have to introduce a new thing, which is a dynamic image. I'm just going to delay that until a little bit later in the talk, and when I'll copy and paste some code magically across. So the only things really remaining at the moment are to link these things together to the bindings. So we're going to use the new Swiss binding syntax, which is a bit like WPF binding syntax or Silverlight binding syntax. And what we're going to do is we're going to link name text to the source name. No, it's animal.name on our view model. We're going to link price to our source price, and we're going to link isLitterTrained to whether or not the animal is litter-trained. Oops, managed to copy the whole line. Okay, so isLitterTrained on us, we're going to bind to animal.littertrained. Obviously, if you're not using Mvvm, you won't be able to do this, but you'll be able to do something else in your code, probably in your table source that sets up these properties in some way. It's not particularly complicated. I just use this because it's convenient and you can see how they all fit together. You can also obviously lay it out better, so you can put it on multiple lines, and then it's a bit easier to see how these things fit together. So hopefully that's the end of our little first bit of kitten cell. We should be able to build still, unless I've done something wrong. Looks like it's building. Let me just find out. No build errors, so that's good. Okay, so that's our kitten cell complete. We want to do exactly the same thing for a dog cell, so I'm going to go through this quite quickly. Let's just take actually let's just do it by cut and paste. So what we're going to do is take our kitten cell. Normally I wouldn't do it quite as evenly as this, but take our kitten cell, put it down here, and we'd like to create a dog cell instead. It's not a god cell, a dog cell. So we take our kitten cell, convert it to a dog cell, convert it to a dog cell again. The binding text will be similar but slightly different because we won't have an isLitterTrained, but let's just do that. Then at this point, do put it in its own file, because if you don't put it in its own file, then the MonoDevelop can't do its magic of generating a partial file to go with it. So what we do is we move file using the right click menu, at which point we've got our dog cell a bit faster than we had our cat cell earlier. Obviously there's some missing things because we no longer have the kitten cell partial. We'll get that in a moment though. So let's now add a new xib, and again, as I said, you can use iPhone or iPad just to prove it. I'll use iPad this time. And we're going to take our dog cell as the name, and so let's do that. We'll then open dog cell in MonoDevelop. Let's get rid of that warning, it doesn't matter what that was. And you can see what it's done is it's generated a huge view which is for the iPad. Just as with the iPhone, we don't want it, so we delete it. Just as with the iPhone, we want a table cell view, so we find one, a TableViewCell, sorry. And how are we going to design our dogs? Let's make our dogs much bigger. And so what we're actually going to do is our row height is going to be 160 for dogs, which is pretty big. And what we are going to do is we are going to take a image and we're going to fill the whole thing. Oh, let's do it in the same order. So what we're going to do is we want this to be a dog cell. So we're going to put dog cell in this thing. And as I say, make sure you tab away to a different control before you switch. And here we're going to do a dog cell. And you can see it's come up again with the IntelliSense straight away because MonoDevelop has done magic to generate those files for us. You know, over here now you hopefully will see there's a dog cell as well as a kitten cell. Really good stuff. Right, so back here we can now say we're going to do an image. So let's take an image and let's fill this thing. Go on, fill it. Okay, so it doesn't want to fill it for me. So let's just take the image and we are going to say, I think it was 150, was it? 155 by the looks of it. And width we're going to fill again. So that's our image is going to fill everything. Just to do some styling, let's put a view across half of it, say. And so this is going to be a UI view. One of these guys. Oops. It looks like I managed to add an extra view there. Let me delete that, apologies. Let's take this view and put it across there. So we're going to put this over the top of the right hand side and like that. And what we're going to do with this view, you know, it's going to fill it again, is we are going to make it semi-opaque or semi-transparent depending on how you feel about it. So let's just take the alpha and we'll take it down to 0.7. Yeah. And as background color, we will choose black. Yeah, so that's going to cover half of our picture. Normally, you might not have this, you might not like it, you might like something else, but yeah, this is going to be the style we choose. Our designers have told us. And on top of that, we're going to put some labels. So let's just do that. There's a label here, which is going to be the price. So this is the price label. We'll just put that in as text. We would then have another label which is going to be the name, and we'll put that down the bottom, and again we'll make it bold. This isn't by any means a fully designed UI. It is for demo, but I think you'll at least get the idea from this, and let's make it a little bit bigger. And then we did have something that said whether or not it was good for children or not. Perhaps you might, you know, make this a icon or something rather than a label, but for our purposes we're just going to use a label. So this is good with children, and let's make that a bit smaller. And again, you see it doesn't update the UI unless you tab away, so as soon as you do that, it tabs away. And let's just make that italic just for fun. So there are our three labels. There's our UI image view. We now want to bind that up, or whatever the correct word is, to our C# object to get that designer file. So again, we just right click and generate these things. So let's just do it. So this is the dog image view. The next thing is the price label. Next thing after that is this name label. Again, I'll just show you all the places you can click on to get these guys generated. That's the name label. And then the final one is the good with children label. So I hope that was straightforward enough for you. If we save that, just Control S or choose Save, then hopefully when we go back to MonoDevelop, you'll see it updates things, it notices that things have changed on disk, and hopefully you can see dog cell here is getting a second half. You can see there is also a round trip at the moment. It's gone back to Xcode again with the changes, but hopefully you can see dog cell has these things within it. And then what we really need to do is similarly to what we've done in KittenCell. So let's just take some of these guys. Hopefully I'll use vaguely similar names. Yep, so some of these are already in there. The difference was the is litter train, so this is good with children. And so this is the .good with children label. And again, we're just using hidden to actually decide that. So you can see, you know, there are patterns here for our two animals. So you might expect us to start pulling out a base class for this. That's really easy to do. It's C#. You know the generation works for, you know, any classes, and it's just there for you to use. So hopefully we can build again still. I haven't updated the binding, have I, to is good with children is the only thing I haven't done. And that won't get told at compile time, so it's here. So is good with children is going to be animal.good with children. That's our binding. And hopefully that should just build. Okay, so that's our cells. Not with images at the moment. We'll add those. Not with those commands for buy and sell and raise price and lower price. We can add those, but our basic cells are there. So let's close that folder. We know it builds, and let's add our main page. So the thing that is going to be our view for our pet shop view model. Yeah, this guy. So we go here, we go add new file, and again we want to use XIB. So what we do is we go for an iPhone view controller. I am choosing iPhone specifically here because I'm designing for an iPhone. And what I will do is I will add a pet shop view. Hit new, and it should generate for me. If I give it a moment, it should generate a C# file, a C# designer file, and a XIB. So let's just see what it's managed to do. It's just updating. So again, when you get these things all open, it does do a little bit of updating, which slows you down a bit. But you can see it has generated the XIB and it's generated the C#. Because I'm using MvvmCross, I don't want to inherit from a UI view controller. I want binding because I love to have binding. So what I'm going to have is a binding touch view controller. And that itself is going to inherit from a pet, or it's going to be a generic on a pet shop view model. And hopefully that was the right name, so you just do that. The generics are going in MvvmCross soon because of what Rolf calls Heisenbugs. I've never seen a Heisenbug, but I believe they do exist, and I really never want to see one, so I will remove them. But for the meantime, that's the syntax. Because we're doing that, we also have to add a special constructor for MvvmCross, which is a request. And so again, we just resolve that. And that has to be passed to the base class. But that's the only thing we really have to do there. And so at this stage, we have, you know, converted it. And if we were to run this up, let me just prove it works. If we were to run this up now, we would actually see a UI. It's going to compile. Just see if the UI comes up. Compiling to native code, running it. So at this stage we run it up and you will see not a very exciting UI for our pet shop. So let's stop that, run, stop, and let's start designing the UI. To do that we open the XIB, or nib, depending how you feel like. And you can see this is the UI we've just seen. And what we want to do is we're going to add a button at the top, so here, and again using these positioning things, we're going to say it's at 2020. Width we'd like it to be 280, so that it almost fills there, and we'd like it to expand and to link to the side, so that if anything goes wrong, you know, if the next generation of iPhone comes out, or if this is shown on iPad, it'll stretch, and this is what we do. Okay, so that's the button we're going to use, and that button we're going to put a label on it, if I can find it, and the label is going to say add animals. Hopefully that's okay. And then underneath that we are going to, we could show some text fields. That's probably not going to happen in this tutorial because I'm talking too long. But we're going to add a table view. So again, we just down here type table view and we get it there. And we're going to add this into the remaining area. And what we'd like to do is fill that area, so we do that. And here what we do is we say we would like to fill it. That looks like it has already got the right settings to fill it. So we'll remove, we'll leave the top one. We want it that distance and we want it to fill all of the available space. So that's our table. You can see it's there. The row height is going to vary each time because we've set these different types of cells in there. And that's it. So what we now want to do is link this table view and link that button back to our C#. So we ask to show the assistant editor. And then what we do is we, exactly as you expect, we say we'd like a new referencing outlet for the table view. So this shouldn't come as a surprise to you. However, for the button, I don't really need a reference to it because I'm not going to change it. But what it would be very nice is to have a method that linked to the action, which is for touch up inside, which is basically button click. So what I'm going to do is add that, and so this is on add animals click, for want of a better term. So we've added those. If we now choose save, then go back to MonoDevelop, what we should see is that MonoDevelop will very intelligently, oops, no, it says it's got a problem, but hopefully, hopefully it has updated this. It has. There was a slight problem there. Generally you just keep going and it works things out. I don't know what its problem was there, but it's not going to stop me in this demo, so I'm quite happy, but I will find out. So what we've got is we've got a table view and we've got a partial C# method. If you're not familiar with partial C# methods, you can join me. They're not something I use a lot, but basically what a partial method means in a partial class is if there is no implementation for that method, then at runtime or at compile time, the compiler will just void out whatever tries to call it and nothing will happen. It's very strange, but it works for these kind of designer type things. So over in PetShopView, you can see we've got not much code in there at the moment. What we'd like to do is we would like to implement that partial method. So we take it across to here and we give it a body. And what would we like to do? Well, I think when that button click happens, we're going to show a UI alert sheet. Is it a UI alert sheet? UI action sheet. So let's do that. Var sheet equals new UI action sheet, and let's give it a title of add animals because that's what we're going to do in it. Onto that sheet we'd like to add some buttons. So we will add a first button which is to add a dog, big choices, and the second one is to add a kitten, add button, add kitten. And then what we'd like to do is whenever any of those buttons get pushed, we'd actually like to respond. So let's do the clicked event and let's create a method called handle handle add button add animal clicked. And then the final thing we'd like to do in this method is to actually show it. So we do show in view and we pass in this .view. That's our sheet. To respond to the click, what we'll do is we'll use the view model that we've obviously got available to us because we're in an Mvvm view. And what we'll do is we'll switch on e.buttonIndex. So if it's the first one, then that is the the 0th one. That is the dog. So what we do is view model, and we know that it had an add dog command, so we just call execute, passing in no arguments, and return. In the case of 1, we do view model dot add kitten command dot execute. You could have bound these things up using binding if you wanted, but a little bit of code behind doesn't kill anyone apparently. And so that's what I've done. So you can see how that links in. The next thing we need to do then, that's adding things completely handled. The next thing we need to do is the table, and for a table you always obviously need a table source. So we're going to do a table source. Normally, if you're writing code, you'll probably inherit from UITableViewCells to do that. Because we want it to bind automatically for us and have an item source, what we're going to do is we're going to inherit from a simple bindable table view source. It's simple just because it's very easy to use, and we'll create a constructor for that, and that constructor will take the UI table view that's going to bind to. It's going to provide the source for, so that's table view, and that is going to pass that down to the base class so it can use it, and then because this is going to be a nice app for people to use, what we're also going to do is we're going to enable animations. So there is a use animations property in a simple view, which we're going to set to true. And what we'd like to do is, for example, when we add a animal, dog or cat, what we'd like to do is we would like it to appear from the right. And when we remove an animal, then what we'd like to do is we would like it to appear table view row animation. Let's fade it when we remove it. So hopefully you'll remember those when it comes to it. Right, what customizations do we need to do? We know that we have variable size cells. So if we take a look at it, we need to override the row height so that we can work it out. So the first thing we do is get height for row. That tells us the index path, so we need to know what's at that index path. So the item at that index path you can get by using getItemAt, and that's the index path. We know that the item itself is always going to be a pet shop animal view model, so that gives you what it is. And then we just need to decide whether it's a cat or a dog. So if item is item.animal is a kitten, and that's not in our namespace yet, but it will be any moment. If it's a kitten, then the row height is, I think we said it was 90 for a kitten cell, I might be wrong. If the item.animal is a dog, which again isn't in our namespace yet, so let's get it in, resolve. Then we will return, I think this was 155, was it in the end? We actually got as the row height. I think it was 160, and so we may have some padding that we got wrong for our cat. Let's add in 5 padding, and hopefully that's okay. Yeah, if we've got it wrong, we can work it out shortly. And then obviously if we don't know what it is, we should probably throw an exception, but nothing's going to handle it, so throw new exception. Oh dear. Not production code that, but that's what we'll do in this case. And then we need to actually sort out how we're going to display the cells. So anybody who's come from Objective-C or from MonoTouch previous to iOS 6 will know that what you normally have is a getCell method, and in that getCell method you have to work out your identifier, and then after you've worked out your identifier you checked whether or not you can dequeue a reusable cell, and then if you can't dequeue a reusable cell you create a new one. In iOS 6, and a really good reference for this is Mike Bluestein, I hope I got his name right, Mike Bluestein's collection view tutorial and his Zaminar. And in iOS 6, instead of that, what you can do is you can register your table cells, and what that means is that whenever you call dequeue, then iOS itself, the operating system, and the table view control and the collection view control, they'll actually create one for you. So dequeue will never fail. So that's what we're going to do. So back in the constructor, what we're going to do is we're going to get hold of the table view, and we're going to register a nib for cell reuse. And the nib in this case is going to be a UI nib from a name. The name is going to be kitten cell. It's in the main bundle because we're in this, so it's an nsBundle.mainBundle. I think you can pass null in there, but I always pass in that. And the reuse identifier is the reuse one, which I think we put in as kittencell.identifier. And that's our first one registered. The second one we're going to register, well, it's exactly the same thing but with dog, so let me just cut and paste that line and get rid of that. So then we have here a dog. So if you're not familiar with the way this works, then as I say, check out Mike's Zaminar, or just give it a go. It works wonderfully is basically the answer. And what that means is that in our override down here for get cell, then what we can do, actually no, we don't override get cell because that's what MvvmCross uses. So what MvvmCross instead provides for you is a get or create cell, and that's already worked out for you what the item is. So all we have to do is to cast it. So var, we'll call it a view model, equals pet shop animal view model of the item. And then we're going to do the same sort of thing as here. But instead of returning, we're going to just work out what our NS string is for our identifier. And you'd normally put this into some sort of helper method or something. You wouldn't make it as ugly as this. Okay, that's already resolved, sorry. And we'll put in a default value. And the default value is it's going to be a kittencell.identifier. And what we can then do is viewModel.animal, viewModel.animal. Then if we have a kitten, we do identifier equals kittencell.identifier. Obviously that's redundant in this case, but it's just good coding. Identifier equals dogcell in the other case. So there we have our identifier, and what we then return is just table view dot DQ reusable cell, and what we're going to use is this third form. And so the reuse identifier is identifier, and the index path has been passed to us, and that's it. That's how you now do these things. DQ will never fail. I think it does, however, possibly return an object, so we'll cast the object back, or an NS object. We'll cast it back to a UITableViewCell so that it doesn't break the call. So that's the table source. All that remains for us to do is actually to call that table source. So let's create it. So what we're going to do is var source equals a new table source, and we're going to pass in the table view that we've created in our nib. Remember back here when we it's not actually on the screen at the moment, but the nib, when we created it, we called it a table view, so it's in the designer. Hopefully here you can see it, it's this guy. And then we just need to also bind it. So that's where we do this dot add bindings, and the bindings we're going to do is a new dictionary, and we haven't got that in our namespace either. Dictionary object string. So resolve that. And so the only binding we actually care about here, let's just add that into our namespace as well. The only binding we care about is the fact that we're binding our source, and on it we're binding our item source to the stock on the view model. So that's what we're adding in there. And obviously I've got this syntax slightly wrong for dictionary. It's supposed to do that. So that's that. Having done that, we can then get hold of our table view again. We can set the source on the table view to be the source, and we can ask the table view to please reload your data. And that, I believe, is all the code we needed to write. So let's see whether or not we've done any bugs as we've been typing. If we rebuild, okay, it builds. The big question is, does it run? Let's find out. So we build it. So we built it. You can see it's got some trace, just some diagnostics. If we call add animals and we choose to add a dog, then hopefully what you saw is swinging in from the right was a dog. We have got some slight sizing issues. Sorry about that. If we decide to add a kitten, we can add a kitten. There's a bit of a problem there with some binding as we've done that, but you know, Hopefully that's nothing too bad. And hopefully you can see we can add a lot of these guys. So you can see how that was, you know, well, quite lucky. I don't think I've ever done it before where it's just worked. But you can see how that immediately just worked. And we got a cat. Oh, the cat name didn't work. Let's just see what I've done wrong on the cat name if I can. So the cat name is a name label.text. This name label.text. I couldn't see anything wrong there. Let me open this. So the name on a cat is linked to, it's been unlinked somehow. So let me just take a look at the, I think this was, if you remember when we actually did this, we managed to bind something else to it. So let's just link it. So we've tidied that up. Hopefully now when we go back, so you can see that, you know, you can have slippy fingers when you do this. But so let's save that, stop the run. And run it again. And hopefully now that fix in the zip file should mean that we get cat names and dog names. Let's just check. If we add an animal and we add a kitten, we now have a kitten, and that one was litter trained and that one wasn't. They're all the same price at the moment, and you can see they slide in. Right, so that's pretty good for a start demo. Let me just quickly go back to the text. So hopefully you saw that we worked with some zibs and we added a new UI view for a kitten cell. Hopefully you saw that we worked with some zibs and we created a new UI view for a dog cell. We then created a UI view controller rather than a UI view for our pet shop and drew that out. We've got just a couple of minutes spare. So what I'd like to do is actually get those image views working. To do that I am going to cheat a little bit. And that's because I always cheat a little bit, but I've just got some pre-canned text here, and images, as you know, in iOS you need some sort of helper, whether you use MonoTouch.dialog or whether you use some other library or whether you use MvvmCross to download these things, and that's all I'm going to do here. Obviously normally I'd put this in a shared place, but today is a bit more of a hurry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an image helper here to each of my things, and all it is another property, if you like, called image URL, and it just uses a thread to download an image from the internet. That's all it's doing. You can put default images as well locally if you want to. It's just a helper, exactly what you're expecting. And we're going to initialize that during construction, so let's do that. And then, because it's the way we're coding it, we're going to just cut and paste this stuff across to the cat cell as well. So let's just do that. So hopefully you can see the dog cell there. It's all been updated. And we're going to do the same thing in the kitten. So we add this initialize call to the kitten cell constructors, and then we copy this pair section here across. I can talk about this another day. It's just for now we'd quite like just to see some pictures of some cats, and that's where I'm going. So we want to resolve that, and obviously we don't have a dog image view, we have a kitten image view here. Yes, so that's all linked up. Now we just want to bind this property to the kittens property. So in our data binding, we're going to add a semicolon, and we're going to say please bind my image URL on this cell to my image URL on my animal, which is obviously on my kitten. And we just want to do the same thing in the dog cell because I forgot to do it there as well. So again, we've got an image URL and we know we've got an animal. So we do image URL animal.image URL. So that's it. Hopefully, if I'm lucky and if place dog and place kitten are working nicely for us, if I now start debugging this, then now what we should get is we should get a nice dog. Go on, shadow. Yep, so shadow's been loaded, and well, the opacity wasn't working very well for us, but you can just about see him behind there. And when we add our kitten, we also get that. Yeah, so you know, every time we add a dog, hopefully we get a different dog. Every time we add a kitten. And here you can see the difference in styling and the different in heights between these guys. Okay, hopefully you can also see the animation as it comes in. Let's prove that we've got proper data binding going on. Just for one of these cells, for the dog cell, let's open it up. And you can see this is the dog cell. Let us add a button to this dog cell. We're going to add it in a crazy place up here. And so this button, let's just give it an X. This is going to be a delete button, basically. So again, you have to tab away for these things to get seen. So that's our delete button, and we would just like to really capture the touch up inside on it again. So let's drag that down there as a touch up inside. So that's delete button action. Yeah, so that's hopefully good for us to go. And while we're in there, let's also go and do, well, let's just handle that first. So delete button action, what we'll see is that MonoDevelop and MonoTouch will cunningly generate that action for us, again using a partial. So you can see there it is. So you find the partial, you copy it across, you take the dog cell and you go, right, what I'd like is, please, when somebody pushes that, I'd actually like to have a delete action. So what you do is you add a public I command as a property, and this is just a normal auto property of delete command. In fact, it's not delete, is it? It's cell. That's what's happening. It's a cell command, so it's going to be deleting it from the list, but actually the action as far as the user's concerned is he's managing to sell his dog, so we're going to do that. And what we do here is in the delete action is if, well no, it's just cell command will be set because I'm confident of my binding, cell command or execute null. That's all we do. So obviously we need to add the binding for cell command, and cell command is there. And I think on our pet shop animal it is a cell command, so we're just binding cells to cells. And just to confuse you, that's happening within a table cell. But anyway, so you can see there, that's our binding. And let's now also to the kitten, we had a couple of other commands there, which were price up and price down. So let's add a couple of buttons for those. Obviously, you know, it's not the prettiest styling we're going for here, but should be okay. So let's find a way of increasing the price, which is going to be this button. So that's going to increase the price. And let's show you that you can also copy things. No, you can't copy things here. It's Control C and Control V to copy. So this guy is going to have a plus and minus button. So that's how you do plus and minus. And again, we're going to link those actions in. So if we select this here, okay, so we appear to have lost a little bit of our binding, which is a shame. Okay, so when you lose your binding, what I generally do is I give up and I go xcode, quit xcode, and hope it's saved everything there. And then I open xcode again, and normally what's happened is things have just got out of sync on the file system. So when you open it again this time, normally what happens is when you go to view assistant editor, then you get back your kitten cell. So sometimes things do go a bit wrong, but generally turning it off and turning it on again, a la IT crowd, just works. So this action is a increase button, increase price action. This one is a decrease price action, so let's do that. We save that and close it. And then when we've closed it, obviously we come back to MonoDevelop. MonoDevelop notices that Xcode's changed things, so it will change its generation. Detecting, it's done. And you can see in here we now should have these two partials. So we copy these partials across and give them some implementations. And so in our kitten cell, we can now have our implementations. So we'll add a couple of commands, public I command of increase command, and again these are just auto properties because we don't need to do anything clever with them. Public I command decrease command, again just get and set auto properties, nothing too cunning. And we resolve that, and so when we increase, we're going to call our increase command dot execute null, and when we decrease, we call our decrease command. So that's again here. We remove that because that's already in the designer file, so it's already attached to the partial. So you can see that we've got our things there. So now all we need to do is hook up these bindings for these guys. And so to do that, we just do a semicolon, increase command, and on the animal view mar, it's an increase price. That's what it's called. Should probably end with a command, but I can cope with that for now. And we then have a decrease price as well. So that's our bindings sorted. So hopefully you've seen how quick and easy it was to add that. And now if this builds, of course it'll build. And obviously we're still running the previous one, so we stop the previous one, we start this one, and hopefully what we'll see is, first of all, we added the delete function, so let's just try that. So when you add a dog, you can see he slides in from the right. Hopefully you can see him out sliding in from the right, and his picture should be downloading. If you delete a dog, hopefully you'll see he fades away. Yeah, so that was the way we did it. Add a dog, he slides in from the right. Oh, there's definitely a little bug there. They shouldn't have changed the pictures. When you add a dog, he slides in from the right, but when you delete, he fades away. That looked all right to me. If you didn't like those animations, then they were in the pet shop, weren't they? So we could just change the animations you use there, and you could even change them, you know, over time if you want. So if we say for add, we would like to instead come in from the top. And for remove, what we'd like to do is the middle animation. And again, you can do more things if you want to. But these are all being driven off of, you know, observable collection. So it's not any work for you to do this. You just have to choose which animation. But now if we do that, then what we should get, I hope. So we add some animals. I'm going to add a dog. So hopefully you see he comes in from the top now. Hopefully that background thread is running, and then when we remove him, he's going to do a middle. Okay, so you can kind of see how he does that. It's a bit different, but hopefully you can see when he comes from the top and he goes out to the middle. That's the animations for that. For the kitten, what we added was we added these price things. So if we add a few more kittens to the screens, then if we decide that, you know, particularly pretty here is paws, then we can add increase pauses price, and Dixie's price we can drop. And that's just all managed for you by MvvmCross in this case, but it's all linked together, you know, using this the Xib editor. And you know, it's no problem that you mix dogs and cats together, and you know, you happen to know that you can delete a dog and that you can increase Pepsi's price if you want to. So that really does end the demo. There's more that can be done in the pet shop, like you can show the price as you know, the profit as you purchase these things, but I think you've seen how the data binding works. Everything's just registered together using simple text, using MvvmCross. All of the UI is built in Xibs and then linked back by the cunning magic of MonoTouch and the Xib designer linking and file monitoring. So it's really very powerful. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. hopefully you saw all that. Dogs, cats, pet shops. Hopefully you saw me run and test, and you saw me iterate and add more functionality. You saw me fix a problem when I had a problem with the cat, the name not showing up, and that is it. So yeah, that's the way I deal with it. I will try and do some blog posts as well as a video about it. It all just takes time. If you need to ask any more, you can ask on Stack Overflow, and just tweet me at the question that you might think is relevant to me, and I'll try and do it. Or you can ask on the Xamarin forums, but I'm not following them very well at the moment. I'm just a bit too busy. And I'll try and post something on my blog, slodge.blogspot, and all of the MvvmCross stuff is in GitHub, open source. Thank you very much for listening. I think I talked for well over the time I said I would. I hope it was useful. That is XIBs and TableViewCells.